I feel like most of this morning's message has already been preached. If not in what we've sung and said and prayed, certainly in the words of Paul, and even more so in the manner in which Eugene Peterson has expressed it. I chose to read that today because sometimes I think especially when we read from the epistles, the letters in the Bible, we read them in that same solemn and dignified way in which we tend to read everything else in the Bible, which intones its sacred importance, but doesn't necessarily always communicate the message. And certainly the way Eugene has Paul speak communicates a message, and that's the thing about the letters is they're not intended to be a story. They're intended to be practical and helpful and meaningful to a people. They are a response to people who are struggling, and we could sure use a letter or two like that these days, because we are struggling. And here's the thing about that body metaphor. Paul wasn't the first one to use it. It'd been around for a while. In fact, the people he was writing to would have recognized it right away because it had been used, especially by the Greeks, to talk about a town. The thing about that, though, is, and you can see how this is particularly relevant today too, is the way that metaphor was constructed. Every part of the body was useful, every part of the body was necessary, every part of the body is connected, but there's a hierarchy of parts. There are parts that are more important than others, and there are parts that you definitely don't want anything to do with. And we still do that. We still do it. Think about the manner in which we talk about other people. So-and-so is the brains of the operation. That person has a lot of heart. That person's a butthead. We use different body parts with the implication that they mean a certain hierarchy. There are lots more. I'm not going to do any of them, but there are lots more. You know there are. Even when we talk about people being good with their hands. Even when we talk about people in a way that we hope might be supportive, there's still that hierarchy of parts. Some are more significant than others. And Paul's message is, no, they're not. Everyone is significant. In fact, the lesser the part, the more significant it is. It's great that we can hear these solemn words of Paul from the Bible telling us we are all part of the body. But does that truly have meaning? Look at your hands for a minute, or your feet. What do you think when you look in a mirror? Society has created not just a hierarchy, but a sense of body image that is not particularly positive. It makes us decide that certain things are better than others. I have awesome hair. No, I don't, actually, as it happens. In fact, I don't really care much about my hair. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to it, which is probably why I don't have much. But the point is, why is it more significant than something else? I love the way Eugene got that in the message from Paul. Would you like to have good hair? Well, sure, but I'd like it to be as good as everything else. And I'd like everything else to be just as good as each other. Because every part is important in the workings of the body. And here's the piece of this message that is so important to us right now. When one part hurts, we all hurt. And we all have to be part of the healing. If you break your hand, you don't ignore it and hope it goes away. you help to heal it. The rest of your body knows that's broken and helps to heal it. We need that happening right now. We need to all be part of that. So June is Pride Month, and I just want to take an opportunity to remind people that Pride isn't just a big party, which isn't going to happen this year, obviously. But it's not just a parade, it's not just a celebration, it is a celebration of people being who they are. But it began as a protest. It began in protest of people needing to say, this is who I am, and that's okay. And it should be okay. It should be more than okay. It should be awesome and beautiful and amazing. That also ought to be what you say when you look in a mirror, by the way. It's the standards and the structure that we've put around this metaphor of the body, not just its usefulness, but its looks, its appearance, are not helpful to the true understanding of it. The true understanding is that we need all the parts, and all of the parts are necessary. You can't then go, well, some are more necessary than others. They might be practically useful in different ways, but they're all equal, and we need them all, and they need to be what they are and how they are. That's what makes them perfect, just as they are. So Pride began as a protest. It began as people saying, we can't not be who we are. And in the States, most of the information that you see from the US, the story tends to go to the origins of Pride being in the Stonewall riots. And as Canadians, we might miss the piece of that story that is truly Canadian, because there is a protest from which Pride began in Canada too. People simply wanting to be who they are. And I want you to watch just a short video from Historica that talks about the Canadian origins of Pride. And in particular, I want you to hear the message of the last person who speaks in this video, because he might as well have been Paul.
I know that something got into people because it got into me. What got into me was my own anger over living in a society which finds my existence inconvenient. What got into me was my own anger over harassment on streets that are never safe for me.
The night before the protests, 200 plainclothes police officers raided 4 gay bathhouses in what they called Operation Soap.
One of the cops said, looking at all the showers and the pipes going into the shower room, he said, gee, it's too bad we can't hook this up to gas.
They behaved like the worst kind of animal I've ever seen. I'll never forget it. I'll never forgive it.
The police charged a total of 306 men that night. Community activists were fed up. After years of fighting for their rights, they seized this moment.
They think that when they pick on us that they're picking on the weakest. Well, they made a mistake this time. We're going to show them just how strong we are.
What on earth am I doing this for, I asked myself. I haven't marched since the end of World War II. I know homosexuality is something you do in the dark, but I hadn't expected myself to be marching in the middle of Yonge Street in the middle of the night with about 2,000 others.
The raids were a breaking point for queer communities in Toronto. Their calls for reform, for rights, ignored each time the police bashed in another door. Their shouts of protest were heard at the first official Pride celebration held in June. The raids didn't stop. They continued for almost 2 decades, but the community kept up the fight.
As scattered individuals, we could do nothing. But once we start coming together, once we start forming and conceiving ourselves as a community, then we have strength.